Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us as we're going to talk about GIS at the University of Vermont this afternoon. I put a few comments into the chat box already. We will be monitoring your questions, so if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. I will do my best to get those over to Dr. Galford throughout the presentation. We'll also have time at the end to make sure we capture all of your questions. This session is recorded. We will share it with everyone who has RSVP'd. And I wanted to welcome you to the presentation today. My name is Nicole Lewillier-Fenton. I'm the Content Marketing Manager in CDE, which is Continuing and Distance Education Department at UVM. With us is Dr. Gillian Galford. Gillian, thank you so much for being with us once again to talk about GIS and geospatial technologies. Dr. Galford directs UVM's Geospatial Technologies program. She's faculty in Rubenstein School of the Environment and a fellow at the Gunn Institute for the Environment. Once again, thank you, Gillian, for being with us today. We're going to learn from Dr. Galford all about GIS and geospatial analysis. We're going to dive deep today into the courses in the new certificate program. And when it starts, we've got one class that just started last week, but we've got lots of classes coming up. And we're looking forward into the summer and the fall. What is on the horizon for the courses in the GIS certificate program? We're also going to talk about how you can use that information. What is pertinent to your career? What are the types of skills that you're going to gain out of this program? And I love the slide that we always show at the end about the different career opportunities for this information. I think it's a lot broader than you may think. So we're really looking forward to that conversation. As I mentioned, please put any questions into the chat box. So I'm going to toss this over to Dr. Galford because she is the expert in this and can guide us through what is GIS and geospatial analysis. And it's something we see every single day, whether we realize it or not. So Gillian, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Thanks, Nicole, so much. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about. I teach and do research related to geospatial sciences. So it's really fun to have this certificate opportunity and to talk about it today. GIS and geospatial analysis is a lot more than a map. A map is a product, but what we're really talking about is the integration of information and analysis of information. So it's a really powerful strategy to answer questions. This is an example, as you can tell, a very historical example, but of cholera epidemiology. And it was really through the spatial analysis, the visual representation of cholera cases that identified hotspots. And this is a really early example of geospatial analysis. One of the most famous examples of geospatial analysis early on is a case made famous by Dr. Jon Snow. My undergraduate students love hearing about Jon Snow because they think I'm talking about Game of Thrones. However, I'm talking about a cholera epidemic in the Soho district of London. And at that time, people really thought that cholera was being spread by vapors. And you can see this image from that time shows the vapors spreading this disastrous disease. And what Dr. Jon Snow did is he actually mapped the locations where people had cholera. Instead of just looking at names and dates and lists, he started thinking about the spatial relationships between these cases. And in fact, what he found was not that it was related to the vapors from the cemetery. These cases were not at all correlated with the cemetery. They were correlated with a water pump. And in fact, that water pump was contaminated, and it completely changed the theory of disease as well as how that disease was addressed. So really early roots of epidemiology. And you can see in this picture, cholera is being spread by, in this cartoon representation, by the well pump, not by the cemetery vapors. So we've come a long way since plotting all these things by hand. And we often use maps as a communication tool to talk or to present our results. So this is a map of COVID status from the COVID tracking project at Johns Hopkins University, and they present most of their information on COVID cases in a map format. And you might ask yourself, what is preferred? Would you like a huge data table telling county by county everybody who is affected by something. It doesn't have to be COVID data, right? It could be demographic data related to the census. We often like to look at things like census data in a map format. It's more intuitive. It's a really easy way to communicate. But behind it is a really powerful database. So in GIS, we're able to analyze these things. We're able to overlay different data sets like county information and public health information combined and overlaid into a single data set. And then we can query it. We can ask it questions and answer the questions that we need to make important decisions. So sometimes we do all that analysis and then we still have to think about communication tools. And that's something that we've actually really emphasized in this certificate program is, Nicole, is both those really technical skills and theoretical knowledge of how GIS and geospatial analysis works, but then also really thinking about how we communicate it. So this is a snapshot from the New York Times. They're very famous for their wonderful graphics work. But they have really simplified maps. They're not giving you a lot of numbers and data. They're sort of letting the graphical images speak for themselves. So that's going to one extreme, right, of very simplified communications and graphics. I love this concept. I talked about just a minute ago how we combine different types of data or different data sets, different databases to answer a question together in unity. And that picture at the very bottom might be how you see the world. It's certainly how you see the world if you look at Google Maps or Google Earth or Google Maps with the satellite view turned on. You have this combination of information that is showing you a satellite image, but it's overlaying data on roads. It's overlaying data on buildings and locations, parks, things like that. And actually, all of these are different data sets. And it's through this powerful geospatial framework that we actually start to layer them. And then we can start to ask about relationships between them. How do property values relate to the distance to green space, for example, or maybe distance to freeway? So all sorts of ways we can start relating and asking in-depth questions by combining different data sets in this powerful framework. Again, I kind of flip between this very analytical, powerful tool and then thinking about how we communicate it in very simple ways. So this is a really beautiful conceptual map that is certainly based on the subways of Washington, D.C., but it is not a map that is meant to communicate, say, your distance to the nearest subway station. It is, however, meant to help the user count or note which station they need to get off on. You know, oh, I have 2 stops on the yellow line before I need to get off, for example. So again, that dance between analytical detail and communication simplicity. This is a really cool combination of both. So this is another graphic put together by the New York Times. And if you actually go to their website, it is an interactive page. And what they've done is they've actually combined some cool data sets. So they have combined COVID case counts, so the size of sort of those red dots and clusters, the number of dots and the size of the cluster is relative to the number of case numbers. You'll notice this is in June, so it's an older analysis now. But then they combined it with a totally different data set. In fact, what those traces represent are every time a cell phone pinged, say in New York City, and then if it next pinged in Atlanta, that's a light trace between those. So what they're representing here is the movement via airplanes and how that may have played a role in the spread of coronavirus. And then they're going to the step of creating a really simple way to visualize that as shown in that map format. This is another one I encourage you to look at if you're someone who likes this data and communication interface. So in this map, it was a stylized version of the world. In the center is Wuhan, and all those little arms and legs are going out to other parts of the country, other parts of the world. And the dots are showing the movement of people, again, from flight data and so on. So it's helping us visualize the relationship between different parts of the world, movement of travelers, and so on and so forth. I think another really important thing people are thinking about right now is how we address social justice issues, social equity. In the Rubenstein School, a lot of people are working on environmental justice issues. So perhaps thinking about how community demographics overlap with things like exposure to particular health, either goods like access to public green spaces, or bads like proximity to, say, a hazardous chemical spill. And this is one example from the city of Richmond, and they've actually provided an online web tool where you can look at climate change, COVID and public health, and social vulnerability of different types, all in a single GIS interface. All right, so we'll talk more about those things in context of our certificate.
Absolutely, thank you. I always love hearing how this data can be communicated in ways, I bet there's endless ways that you can communicate it, but I really appreciate how you really distill and so easily help participants and help me see how important that communication is, and as a tool for us to understand coronavirus, understand environmental injustice and impacts that have on our communities. So thank you, Gillian. We have lots of folks that have joined us, so welcome everyone. I see a few new people that have come in. I did put in the chat box, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. This session is being recorded for our new people, and you may have missed a little bit of what Gillian was talking about. We will share the recording out to everybody. So the certificate program, all of the things that Dr. Galford was just talking about is the application and the use and the data communication and the presentation of information is what is being taught in the certificate program. And this is just an overview of the full certificate. We'll get into a few more of those courses and the details in just a moment. But one of the things that I know that students have been asking you, Dr. Galford, is certificate versus credit. Sometimes employers are looking for, if there's a reimbursement, a tuition reimbursement perspective at your job, they're looking for credit. Can you answer that question, if that may be one that people are wondering about?
Yeah, so first of all, the professional certificate is really exciting because many people don't need credit. You don't need another degree. You need the experience, and you need to get that under your belt. So you can add it to your resume, so you can get a promotion, apply for a different job, whatever your motivations are. So the thing that I think is really cool is the professional certificate is a really competitive price point, much more affordable than, say, enrolling in a graduate program. What you mentioned, I'm hearing from not a huge number of people, but some people whose employers are very encouraging of this type of experience, but their policy is to pay for credits. So for most of our courses, not all of them, but for most of them, we do have an option for you to enroll without becoming a full-time student or anything like that, just enroll in the course for credit. And, some people might be interested in that too. Perhaps you're thinking about getting a master's in a few years. You might want to start accumulating the credits. So it's a different tuition cost, but it is an option. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out via our website and we can help you navigate that process.
Great. Thank you for raising both pluses of both opportunities for the professional certificate and for credit. Dr. Galford's talked about a lot of the uses and outcomes of what you can do with this information. This is a little bit more about diving deeper into the certificate program. What are the objectives? What are you going to be learning? What is the software that you're going to be using? So, Gillian, can you just walk us through some of these points for our prospective students?
Yeah, so one really important thing is our philosophy, how we teach about these subjects. Certainly we use software to get hands-on experience, but we're also really emphasizing the conceptual knowledge and the approaches, the problem solving and critical thinking. So that if you down the road are asked, say by your employer, to work with a different software, that your knowledge base will transfer. You might have to switch softwares, but your knowledge base will transfer. And I should mention that we use the ArcGIS Pro as our GIS software. I know some people have questions about that. That is the industry leader in the United States for GIS software. So that's one one advantage there. So really focus on sort of these conceptual and problem-solving skills so that you can transfer that to whatever type of setting you're working in. And then getting hands-on experience, right? Not just knowing kind of the concepts, but really putting them into play from A to Z, going and finding publicly available data sets, working with them, answering relevant questions, building sort of a portfolio, if you will, of skills and experiences. So we also, I've talked mostly about remote sensing, or sorry, GIS, but we will offer remote sensing, which is related to analysis of things like satellite imagery and such. We'll have more coming up on that in a bit. And then really the skills behind it all the way to the communication. So we just started, you put up the spring courses. We started on January 4th, data visualization and communication. So that's off and running, but that is one of those courses where you don't have to work on GIS problems, that you really think about communication. So that's been a really fun and popular course so far.
And I just want to know, because we always get this question too, Intro to GIS, you're seeing that Intro to GIS is coming up in March and then again in May, and Advanced GIS is starting next week. Which one do people take, Gillian?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we feel definitely a lot of very individualized questions about your specific circumstance. So don't hesitate to reach out if you're uncertain about that. I recommend, if you are ready to try Advanced GIS, that you make sure that you've worked with ArcGIS Pro before. That's been a recent change sort of in the GIS field in the last few years. So make sure you're up to speed on that if you want to go into Advanced GIS. If you want to maybe backfill some theoretical or conceptual knowledge of GIS, or you want to start learning ArcGIS Pro, you might want to try Intro.
Okay.
So there you go.
And we can
next week, as you said, is already January 20th, and we have Advanced GIS coming up. So there'll be some really good topics covered here. And this, gets into more advanced techniques. Things like even working with the ArcGIS model builder. So that's when you're doing a lot of repeat processes or multi-step processes. You can build a model set to do that, learning some programming language to make things run. But really, again, that focus on critical thinking and working knowledge of how to find data to answer the questions you're interested in, how to apply and identify the right tool sets, and then how to communicate your results.
Great. And I just want to note, we're going to zip through some of the courses that are coming up for everybody. I do see a few questions coming in, and we'll get to that in just a minute from Randy. The Advanced GIS course, which starts next week, it's not too late to register. You can register likely up until the day of, and the duration is 8 weeks, and it runs, that runs you about into mid-March. And also, Gillian, I had zipped a little bit over this slide. I want to come back to this for a moment in terms of the course structure. So if you're any of our courses that you're thinking about, just when does the module open, and what does it look like in terms of your time commitment?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of our courses are designed to be 8-week courses at about 10 to 12 hours per week. I will note that we did a special offering in January, and data visualization and communication was sort of doubled up into a 4-week course instead of an 8-week course. So there are sometimes exceptions to that. So double check the website to make sure you're clear on that. I see one thing on this slide that just came up in the chat, Nicole, and this was this question about okay, so how do I access this? What kind of computer need do I have or will I have? So as a student in the certificate program, you have access to the GIS software through UVM. So we have a license, and as a student, you will be granted access to it. What we do is we have everybody connect to our virtual desktop. So every student has the same interface. It looks the same to everybody. It is a Windows-based platform. So on your own computer, it's almost like you're working logging into a whole nother computer through your computer. So personally, it does not matter if you have a Mac or a PC. All the processes run on our end. So in translating that, it means that you don't have to worry about the memory and such on your computer. We're all working at home right now, so some of us have worse bandwidth and issues like that. And we do have a tech team to try and help you troubleshoot if you have any issues, say maintaining a connection and such. But I would definitely consider your personal situation and how good your internet connection is to utilize that software.
Good point. Great. Thank you so much. And to the point, it is 100% online. And I want to get into, we'll get back to your question, Randy, in just a moment when we have a slide specifically that dives into the intro, the GIS course, because there's a question in terms of sequence. So we're just trying to line up for everybody today too. What's starting next? And so the advanced GIS starts next Wednesday. And then closely following, February 1st, is geospatial computation. So Gillian, tell us about this course.
Yeah, geospatial computation I'm really excited about. It's a course that really fills, I think, a big need in the field. So oftentimes, before we created this course, we would send students to take a computer science course, but it didn't really have any context or application to geospatial sciences. So this course is about using computer programming in some regards, but it's really about the application of statistics. So it's got this really interesting and highly relevant focus. So geospatial statistics are, for example, instead of thinking about this example that I've shown on this slide, instead of thinking about all Zika cases in Brazil, it might make more sense to think about where there's hotspots. So one type of geospatial analysis that you will do in this class is hotspot analysis, not of Zika, actually of earthquakes. And so it doesn't require any special statistics background, sort of high school level, really basic knowledge of statistics is fine. It does assume that you've used ArcGIS Pro and that you're familiar with that software. So it would be, again, for someone who's already worked with ArcGIS Pro or someone who's completed, say, the intro or advanced GIS. You don't have to complete advanced GIS to take this course. The other thing that's really cool about it is that it's using R and Python within ArcGIS. And the instructor has actually worked with the GIS software company to integrate R. It's a really novel thing, and there's hardly anyone teaching courses on it. So it's a really cool opportunity at UVM. I think I'm sitting in on it.
Awesome. I know your passion for this always comes through, so I appreciate that. And so just wanted to make note of, as I mentioned, February 1st, that runs through almost the end of March. And again, that is starting in about 3 weeks or so. Okay, so this will give us a chance to come back to Randy's question, a little bit deeper dive into intro of GIS. And as you're thinking about it, Gillian, come back to his question too, or her question, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Which one? The sequence. Do I need to take intro, advanced? How does that work in terms of the best case scenario that you would prefer for students?
Yeah, so if you're just getting started in this field, if you have no prior background, intro to GIS is definitely, you want to take that first. If you maybe have some exposure through the workplace or are self-taught in GIS, but want a more formal background, this would be a great course for you to take. Or we're seeing a lot of people who are having to make the migration from ArcGIS Map or ArcGIS Desktop to this total reboot and redesign of the software as ArcGIS Pro. This would be a good way to get up to speed on that, sort of a very friendly way to do that. So you can see a lot of really important foundational stuff. So if you don't have background in GIS, you definitely would want to take intro before advanced. The only people who should take advanced without taking our intro class are people who have maybe already taken an intro course, maybe a few years ago in college, or have a lot of workplace experience feel comfortable with ArcGIS Pro, and so on. If you don't feel like you have that background or experience, I would go ahead and start with Intro to GIS.
Great. Okay. Hopefully that helps Randy answer that question as well. And if you have additional questions, I am keeping an eye on that chat box, and so is Gillian. So Intro starts a little bit farther out, planning for March 17th, runs through middle of May, and again runs that Wednesday, Tuesday. And I'm going to zip back for just a moment before we talk about some of the outcomes of these courses. I just want to zip back to this slide because it is a good idea to plan, especially if you are a working professional and you want to try to figure out, how do I fit that in? What's the right time of year to start some of your coursework? I just wanted to make note also in the spring session / summer session, end of May, Intro starts again, Remote Sensing Foundations, which we're going to do a webinar specifically on that course a little bit later into the year. And then again, Advanced GIS, it will kick in again towards the end of the summer. So
yeah, and Nicole, can we just hover on that slide for 1 second? Because I did see,
let me go back, you bet.
Put a follow-up question about sequencing. So if you have never taken GIS, definitely take Intro before you take Advanced. But you, for geospatial computation, you want familiarity with ArcGIS Pro. So that could be through Intro GIS, or it could be through your personal experience. Data visualization and communication, you can take at any point. You could take it first. You could take it before Intro to GIS. Remote sensing, I would recommend maybe you take Intro to GIS first, but it's not strictly required.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that yes, Allison, thank you. I was actually just going to ask that too. Good job, Allison. Do you offer the data visualization and communication again? When do we see that one coming back onto the course offerings?
Yeah, so we're offering it right now, and we anticipate offering it within the next 12 months again. The date has not been set for that, but there's been a huge demand for that. Really, my dean has been very surprised by how popular that class is. So that's really encouraging. And so we may see it as early as August next year, but certainly within the next 12 months, it'll be offered again.
Great. And that is such a great lead-in. I know I'm zipping here. Bear with me, everybody. But I wanted to just come back to this slide because the data visualization and communication, oh my goodness, you can use that across so many different roles and fields and careers. And we were talking before that one of our project managers on our continuing and distance education team is interested in this course. And so maybe just touch on the skills that you gain in this certificate program that can really be relevant to so many different careers and different jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I love to encourage my students to do is look on, say, a website like glassdoor.com, right, which posts tons of job openings, and put in maybe a place you're interested in and GIS and see what turns up. You'd be surprised how many GIS hirings there are out there. So it's a super nimble and applicable field. And I think we'll talk about some examples of specific types of jobs or industries you might go into working. But that's a huge resume builder and sort of career advancement tool for a lot of people, is picking up those skills. We also work with GPS technology. We use GPS every day in our phones without really thinking about it. It's actually the GPS chip in your phone that's helping you navigate, not your cell signal. So we'll learn a lot about GPS technology, which is also used in a lot of fields that I think most people don't even realize the way it's being used, but also a really highly demanded skill set. Data visualization and communication, it comes across when you apply for a job or you make a presentation, you publish a report, so on and so forth. So tons of applications and potential there. I see tons of demand for database management. So we have all this information. The world right now is just exploding with information, right, that's being collected. How do we manage it? How do we organize it so that we can analyze it and query it and so on? And that relates to web mapping, workflow, and programming, and so on and so forth.
You're so right. I was just in a meeting not that long ago when we were talking about the need to dissect and manipulate and understand data more effectively. And I work in content marketing, so look at that. I love this slide too, because it really gets people to think about all the different opportunities. With this certificate program, I love the suggestion too of going on Glassdoor and just looking to see the different roles that GIS would be relevant to. But you see your students go in a variety of different directions. So maybe just touch on some of the things that you've seen.
Yeah, some of my current students are working for consulting groups. Environmental consulting firms are huge. I have 3 or 4 students who've graduated in the last year or 2 who are now working in New England for various environmental consulting groups. So a huge demand there. We're definitely seeing a huge explosion on this. We have it noted here as business analysts, but thinking about real estate, for example, and how now we really think about spatial information when we're talking about real estate and transactions like that. Public health right now is seeing an explosion in uptake in this geospatial information. So tons of careers out there.
Great. Thank you. I always appreciate that. So I want to just give a call out to see if there's any additional questions before we wrap up. It's 2:30, so I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. Looks like we do have another question. So Rory asked, besides the financial part, is there any difference between the certificate program and taking the same courses for credit in terms of professional development? Great question.
Yeah, Rory, thanks for that question. Nice to see you here too. So the courses in the certificate, I want to what that question raises for me is just that I need to emphasize, I got to do a lot of work with our faculty designing and developing these courses, and they were developed to be equivalent to a really advanced 3-credit course. So they are meant to be rigorous academically and challenging. And if anything, I think the instructors see the professional certificate students as needing a little bit more professional development help. And I don't mean needing in like they're needy. I mean that instructors are really excited to engage with the professional students because they see it having a really clear output and relevance to their work. So the instructors, I think for the professional students, are very excited to help them sort of adapt and understand what they're learning for potential applications in their field and their work. And that's something that you don't typically do in a class. Even with graduate students, a traditional academic class is often a little bit in its own bin and not as connected to the real world. So that's the really cool thing about the professional certificate, right, is everybody's kind of coming in with their own motivations, applications, case studies, and things like that.
Thank you for that, and thank you for that question too. I'm just going to ask Kelly and our team to put up our email address into the chat box. So if you have any additional questions, if there's something specific that you want to know and ask about your case and your situation, please do reach out. Our enrollment coaches really do want to talk with you and share information back as well. So I wanted to just make note that we're a few minutes over, so I wanted to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you everyone who joined us today asking great questions. Keep in mind the next GIS course starts in a week, and then we've got a whole bunch more lined up over the next several months. And Dr. Galford, thank you again for sharing your enthusiasm and passion for this and guiding us through what is GIS at UVM. I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.